It's the SKOR North Twin Show.
SKOR North Twin Show, extra innings. It's clearly been a long pause for me as well, as my mute button didn't want to work for me there. Declan Goff hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, live from Target Field. That's Alex Wested back on the SKOR North studios. It's been a while, so thank you for everyone who has listened, watched, and even still was able to catch up on some Twin Show episodes while I was out putting the ring on it, enjoying a little mini moon, and man, getting thrusted back into here, Alex. I was kind of like, 2 days ago, actually. I was trying to figure out, like, hey, I'm going to go in there. I'm trying to figure out a couple angles that I want to work on. I haven't been to the clubhouse in a few weeks, and I'm going to try to get after this stuff. Well, then I walk in, and as expected, just a flurry of roster moves here, as the Twins were obviously very banged up going into the All-Star break. We have some clarification. We have some updates on that. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for the SKOR North Twin Show YouTube channel, and on the podcast feed, leave us a 5-star rating. I have updates on Correa, Royce Lewis, Austin Martin, Chris Paddack, Edouard Julien, Jose Miranda, Byron Buxton. So yes, the Twins are done with the All-Star break. They had 5 days off. They were the only team in baseball who did not play yesterday. Talking around, it doesn't seem like a lot of people were pleased about having an extra off day during the All-Star break. They would have preferred that to be sprinkled in around August or September. Nonetheless, the Twins and Brewers will open a 2-game series, and the Twins open a 5-game homestand against the Phillies. So let's dive into it here, Alex. Let's start with Carlos Correa. So Correa, who did receive a PRP injection in his heel to help with the plantar fasciitis that is now in the opposite foot from a year ago. He will be in a boot for a couple days. He is currently resting at home in the Twin Cities. He's not here at the ballpark. He won't likely be here tomorrow either. They're trying to keep him off his feet as much as possible. It could be here by the end of this series, or maybe even for the Phillies series, to receive the treatment and start maybe an update from there. I will say it sounds like once he can start baseball activities, they'll have a timeline. They don't envision this being a, quote, several weeks to a month injury. The team is optimistic that it'll be shorter than that. But Carlos Correa, who is obviously the captain and leader of this team, Alex, he is in a walking boot. I would envision at least a week plus of no Carlos Correa, so the Twins will be without, their de facto captain for at least this homestand and maybe potentially more.
Well, and I think that's where we've talked about Carlos Correa on this show for the majority of the season, and where he was off to such a slow start. He really got things turned around in May, June, and July here, where that got him to the All-Star game in Arlington, Texas. But when you talk about a player that has a significant impact, Carlos Correa is that guy. And I think that even if you bring up a Austin Martin to help fill that roster spot, you've seen enough, certainly in limited playing time, out of Brooks Lee to really like the direction that he's been going in to help fill that role. But as you look at the trade deadline approaching, and we can talk about this later, there's some things to look at now for the Minnesota Twins, where if it starts with Correa, you have depth behind him, but you need to be able to see that play out. And series against two of the National League's best here in the Brewers today and tomorrow, and then in the Phillies earlier on this week, it's going to be a good way to see where is this Minnesota Twins team against the top competition in the National League, and how much are you going to miss a Carlos Correa among the other moves that have been made today?
Yeah, the last just 29 games for Carlos Correa, an OPS over 1,000, hitting 386. I mean, the month of June basically solidified his case to be an all-star again. The first time with the Twins, that is. He's made it a few times with Houston before. But, yeah, they'll be without him to start. Willie Castro will most likely get the bulk of the defensive work at shortstop. But you bring up a point of Brooks Lee being here, looking the part right away. No doubt that the Twins are going to miss Carlos Correa, and these 5 games against two of the better teams in the National League are going to be very tough, and I'm excited to watch a fun homestand here at Target Field. But if they didn't have Brooks Lee, Alex, I don't know how good I would feel about the Twins infield and just team morale and offensive production in general. Yes, a lot of players have stepped up throughout the course of this year, but I don't know where this team would be. I don't know what you've seen from Brooks Lee, and I know if the stats don't lie, he's got off to a nice start. But if they didn't have Brooks Lee, I would be a little bit more panicked about the left side of this infield for the Twins.
Well, and I think we talked about it too earlier on in the season, Dex, where we talked about how deep this team was, and that if players go down, that this is a team that was going to be in a position to be able to recover and be fine. But it's been kind of that that death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of scenario for the Minnesota Twins in terms of their depth and their health this season, where I'm with you here. I don't know if they lose another piece. I don't know how confident I feel about this infield. And maybe that's where the management group of this Twins team can look at that and say, well, maybe we go out and find some other sort of infield depth, because yes, Willie Castro as an all-star, but so far he's been truly better in the outfield than he's been in the infield, in my opinion. And so that maybe that's somewhere you look with the trade deadline approaching, but I would be just as concerned because you've had depth, and now, well, that depth is all up here. And so there's not much else you can do.
Yeah, so Edouard Julien, by the way, has been recalled from St. Paul to take the spot of Carlos Correa. Julian obviously had a very disappointing start to his sophomore season after a great rookie year with the Twins. And he got off to a tough start in AAA too. And it sounds like, we talked to Rocco pregame, it sounds like as that rehab assignment, as that time, even not a rehab assignment, as the time in AAA progressed, he got more open-minded to changing some things. And I reported on this earlier this year that, Julian can hit balls and takes his approach at the plate a very specific way, and he's done that his entire career coming up to the Twins. So once he's asked to change that, can you make those adjustments and still be the successful player that you were when you rose to the minor leagues, when you had a good start to your rookie season? Then people start adjusting to you. Can you now counterpunch? Can you now make the other adjustments to be a good hitter? And he's batting ninth tonight for the Twins in Game 1 of this series against the Brewers. Obviously, we've seen Matt Wallner come down, come back up, stick around. He's obviously going to be here for the long haul, too. We'll see where Edouard Julien is at, and if this will have to happen again, maybe the Twins will have to force the hand of something. Randomly, by the way, Kyle Farmer and a bunch of other people did experience the flight issues that took place over the last 24 hours domestically and internationally. Kyle Farmer is not here. He is stuck somewhere trying to get here. But infield-wise, we'll see what Edouard Julien can bring. Alex, I think there is still a really good player in there, but I am very curious to see how he takes this second chance basically with the Twins to show that don't ever send me back down to the minors again.
Well, I think I don't want to say in a career as Edouard Julien has had, it's not a make or break call up here, but when you look at what his stats were since he was optioned down in June, he hit 233, 2 doubles, 1 triple, 5 home runs, 11 driven in, and an on-base percentage of .400. I don't know that that's really that great at AAA in my opinion, but this is a proven call up for Eddie Julien, where I think the 9-hole tonight against the Brewers is a great place to start him and start to see, can he start working that bat up? Because you think about a year ago, Dex, where he was a top of the lineup kind of guy in June and July, and then eventually that average just slowly started to dip down. And then you saw it a little bit too, where when the bat went down, the fielding was a concern for Julian as well, especially at second base. You'd see him out there before the game working on those ground balls, consistently getting that practice in. But there would be those, I don't want to say routine, because I'm sitting here in a studio and I'm not on the field myself, but there would be those routine balls that he wouldn't be able to field cleanly and he'd make mistakes on. And so this, even though he's a young player, it's early on in his career, and maybe Montreal gets MLB franchise in the distant future and there can be a trade that happens there if this doesn't work out. But this is a prove it call up for Eddie Julien, and Twins fans all over the country are hoping that we see the Eddie Julien that we saw in 2023.
Yeah, I loved that when Jose Morena got called up to be, just basically the call-up for Royce Lewis, and he turned into one of their best hitters. Matt Wallner did the same thing. Brooks Lee came up, did the same thing. So I wonder if Edouard Julien is contagious. Maybe there's something in the water here where maybe one of these guys can continue to progress. Update on Royce Lewis. So I was able to catch up with him for a little bit in pregame. He is running sprints. He said he gave, he basically got a 17-day vacation because they shut him down. Obviously about a week ago, and he's just taking BP right now. He took BP, just finished that up here this afternoon on Saturday. He's also running. He's running sprints. He does feel good. I know Royce Lewis doesn't want to do a rehab assignment. I would be shocked if he doesn't. I know Rocco envisions a rehab assignment for him. Of course, in classic Royce Lewis fashion, he felt like he could have played after about day 3 of that groin strain. He said it feels great, but he is trusting the process. He is in line with what the training staff is asking of him. I thought this was going to be more of a significant injury, not as significant as the quad injury in terms of the timeline, but I would actually envision, and this is not me reporting, this is just me pontificating, we're probably going to see him at least in St. Paul in probably about a week's time. Like, I really don't envision this being too much longer of an injury. We'll see if he's back activated by like August 1st, but I would envision a rehab assignment is actually closer than we thought going into the All-Star break. Seems like he's doing well hitting and running sprints, and of course then the next step is obviously doing a rehab assignment, being on your feet for a couple hours, playing third base, where he's obviously been playing. So Royce Lewis progressing well, and I do think we're probably getting closer to the next step of him joining the team off the injured list.
Well, and that's where it's so important, too, where you think about the little logistics of moving your AAA team from Rochester, New York to St. Paul, Minnesota. Those little logistical things just prove dividends here, where you can just send them across the river and back, and that just makes that rehab appearance so much easier and so much quicker. And I think that as much as Royce Lewis wants to be on the field with the major league team, and we've seen since he's come up the impact that he has had on this batting roster and also on the fielding roster, where he's been a spectacular addition. And I know that the big conversation back in that draft was, do you go Hunter Green or do you go Royce Lewis? Well, both have worked out, truly. And I think that the quicker you can get Royce Lewis back, it's just how can you make sure that he's not going to be in a position where he can re-injure himself, because Royce Lewis is too valuable to be left off of this team and left off of this field. And especially down the stretch, you're going to need him because, that gap with Cleveland has narrowed, but it's still not as close as you'd like it to be. And you still have those meaningful games against Cleveland coming up where you have to keep him healthy. So I like the rehab stint, but I know he wants to get back out there right away. But to Royce, I would say let's take our time a little bit. Let's make sure we do this right. The schedule's a little bit forgiving right now after this homestand. Let's take our time and make sure that we do this right.
Yeah, I mean, from our original point off the top of this episode, and by the way, hit the like button, subscribe button for Minnesota Twins content. This is SKOR North Extra Innings. My name's Declan Goff. That's Alex Wested back at the SKOR North studios. They're without Carlos Correa and Royce Lewis now again this season. Those are two of probably their best players on paper going into the year. They're the most recognizable players, and honestly, in a perfect world at the playoffs, we're starting and everyone's healthy. You're talking about those two guys probably batting somewhere in a combination next to one another, 2, 3, 4 or so, and now you have to get by without them, and we'll see if the Twins can still hang around and be competitive against these in these 5 games against the Phillies and the Brewers coming up. Austin Martin also activated from the IL. He is now back too, so he was activated from the injured list. Jose Miranda is ready to come off the IL tomorrow. However, doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. He's eligible to come off tomorrow. He's hitting in the cage soon. But probably a few more days on Jose Miranda. So again, I mean, we just talked about Carlos Correa. We talked about Royce Lewis. Jose Miranda has obviously been one of the best hitters in baseball over the last month. They're close with him. Of all the guys that I have been mentioned so far today, he's probably somewhat the closest, maybe I could say, of coming back and helping this team in terms of sooner rather than later. But no Jose Miranda. Don't think he'll come off the injured list tomorrow. Still progressing, but Austin Martin, another spark plug, different type of player that you can play at multiple positions. He's also back from the injured list, so Rocco can get a little creative with his lineup, however that's gonna look.
Well, and that's important too. If you're a major league manager, you got to work with what you got right now. And while we talked about at the beginning of this segment where you have a lot of talent that's up here at this time and at this moment, you have to be able to make the most of it. And granted, since the calendar turned to July, a lot of the players that have been on this roster in these significant roles have been making impactful plays and impacts in the outcome of games where, Rocco hasn't really been put into a bad spot, truly. The big questions, though, again, and we'll talk about it later here with another pitcher that's going back and making some changes to the injured list as it stands right now. The problem here, again, is this bullpen, where aside from Joan Duran at home and Griffin Jacks, it's tough to trust this bullpen with where it sits right now. But the batting lineup 1 through 9, you can move the pieces however you want, and really you have a lineup that batting-wise can go out and contend with just about anybody in the American or National League.
Yeah, and I would 100% add, obviously, Jorge Alcala to that conversation. He has emerged very nicely after being, shuffled back and forth. Brock Stewart is throwing. I think also he's probably very close to getting back here with the Twins as well, and that gives them, again, it just lengthens everyone out where you're not asking, a guy like Cody Funderburk to maybe get big timeouts, and you can kind of slot down in the lower leverage situation. So I think Brock Stewart is progressing to coming back here soon. Taking a look on Chris Paddack, you mentioned him. He is going back on the injured list. It's a forearm strain. He has experienced some elbow tightness. He woke up, experienced some elbow tightness the other day. So this is a guy that had a couple Tommy John surgeries. Alex, I wouldn't say that this is major. I probably, and this is just Dr. Declan, I wouldn't classify this as minor either. So he is dealing with another forearm strain. He dealt with another, I believe it was a shoulder issue technically because it was arm fatigue, throwing so many innings for the first time in multiple years. Wasn't able to comment on his injuries. Chris Paddack was at the moment. However, the Twins will be in need of a starter, I believe, by Wednesday to finish this homestand. To be determined who that is. But we just talked about guys in the bullpen. If Chris Paddack can get in a good spot here where that arm is not giving him problems, and that's obviously from the elbow up to the shoulder, I mean, that's another guy who I just envision being a decent bullpen arm. It just obviously now we're getting to a scary spot where you have someone who's dealing with another arm strain who has had multiple arm surgeries. So Chris Paddack shut down on the injured list. Twins will have to use a fifth starter by Wednesday.
And that's the concern with Chris Paddack moving forward is, yes, he's a good guy, and he does all this great work for the Twins community, the same too when he was in San Diego, but the arm injury and the durability is a concern where you think about what you have and needing that fifth starter for the Wednesday game in the Phillies series. Where do you go try to see what you can get out of Louis Varland on a short start? Yep. Do all of a sudden you give Randy Dobnak another try here at the major league level? I've seen, in terms of trade conversation, do you go, and I saw a projection that said that Nathan Eovaldi from Texas here would be an option. I don't know that that's necessarily something that's in my wheelhouse. I don't know that that's available right now, but you're going to need that fifth starter. And when you look at this rotation, Pablo Lopez has had his struggles this year. Joe Ryan has been solid. Bailey Ober's been phenomenal. We talked about him very early on in this season. Simeon Woods Richardson has been a steal of all steals, especially what he's given you. I don't think anybody expected him to have this significant of a role in this rotation out of spring training here. But you need that fifth starter, and if it's not going to be Paddock, it has to be somebody. It has to be somebody quick because, again, that trade deadline, we're sitting here, Declan, on the 20th of July, where you're 10 days away, realistically, from the trade deadline. You have to figure out, are you going to trust Chris Paddock to stay healthy, or are you going to make a move or trust somebody down in your bullpen that has major league experience at St. Paul to make that happen? And I don't know what the Twins are going to do because there's no clear answer to that conversation right now.
Yeah, I would envision, man, that there's going to be some type of ad, especially from a starting side. We'll see what the price is. Eovaldi would be probably actually a dream scenario. I just don't know where Texas is going to be. They're playing Baltimore right now. They're also close to getting, DeGrom back. Tyler Mahle is close to getting back, a former Twin who dealt with some injuries here. And they're still flirting with that third wild card spot. But I envision they have to get another starter just because, number one, it would lengthen things out, make life easier. It's a numbers game to get you to the end of the year with your starting pitchers. But I don't know, they won't be in on a guy like Skubal. They won't be in on even a bullpen arm like Mason Miller. So can they figure out other ways, to lengthen that rotation? Because right now they are, it's kind of classic Twins. They're about one really good starter away from being a very competitive team and can threaten in the playoffs for a run. Right now they're one guy away from that. So Eovaldi would be great. I think in a dream scenario, I'd try to figure out how a way to make that trade happen if I was Thad Levine and Derek Falvey. But at the same time, we'll see what the asking price is and where they want to go. But I envision at least one more starter, I think, coming here in about 10 days.
Well, and I think the other name that you can add to that not coming to Minnesota list is probably Garrett Crochet out of Chicago, where I think that between him and Skubal, both in the division, I don't see an in-division trade for a starting pitcher happening, especially one in Skubal that you could have argued could have started the All-Star game for the American League, and then Crochet being the leader in the major leagues in strikeouts. I don't think either of those things is going to happen, but again, you look at what's available. Eovaldi is the gem out there. And if Minnesota's in there, well, the Yankees are in there too, certainly with the fall that they had in the month of June. Every other contender is in that conversation for Nathan Eovaldi. Even the Boston Red Sox, who rode him. I remember that one game. It was one of the games in Dodger Stadium in the World Series where he pitched for like 8 innings in the 10th inning on and was just dominant. So I think that, Minnesota's got to put themselves in a good spot. If you want to focus on the bullpen, guys that I think that could be available, you're looking at a Carlos Estevez out of Anaheim. You're looking at a Tanner Scott. You're looking at a Kyle Finnegan as names that are possible. But again, with how strong the American League is, do you consider making a move? That's up for the front office to decide. but you still want to be able to at least focus on that bullpen and then finding that fifth starter to be able to at least get you to October. Because, Dex, as we know, once you get to October, anything can happen.
Yeah, and the game becomes completely different. You're talking about, bullpen arms coming into the game in high leverage situations a lot earlier than possible in the 5th or 6th innings. So the game changes, and the Twins need probably at least one more legitimate starter to be taken seriously in the American League. One last note here, Byron Buxton. He was dealing with an elbow injury after, I believe, crashing into the wall last week. Sounds like he's in a better spot. He should be all right. I believe Byron is in the lineup tonight for the Twins, or at least tracking to be in a good spot going all. So he will not be going on the injured list by any means. Buck is batting third for the Twins on Saturday, playing center field. So I think the time off obviously benefited him a lot. We obviously know Buxton has dealt with a barrage of injuries. It's been mostly the knee that has caused him problems over the last 2 years. This one being an elbow injury, playing the way Byron Buxton does. Sometimes that can happen, but sounds like Byron Buxton is in a much better spot. So there you go, man. I mean, there's Carlos Correa updates, Royce Lewis updates, Chris Paddack updates, Eddie Julian, Austin Martin, Jose Miranda. Plenty of stuff here. I mean, welcome back. Welcome back to baseball with the Twins having a 5-game homestand today against the Philadelphia Phillies.
Well, it's this is the exciting time for baseball, right? We're coming down the stretch run here, and this is the time where people start paying attention to baseball. Yeah, Vikings training camp is coming up here in the not too distant future. Don't forget to go over and subscribe to Purple Daily while you're here on SKOR North YouTube. But also, this is the exciting time where the pennant chase really starts to hit home. And, we're still in a pennant chase, are these Minnesota Twins. And you have the opportunity to do something really special. Byron Buxton being healthy and being on this roster is also, and aside from Correa, Lewis being a part of that conversation, Buxton being healthy is in that same conversation. I mentioned earlier on the SKOR North Twins show way back, and I got flamed for it like crazy in the comments, where I said Byron Buxton had the ability and had all 5 tools to be a 5-tool player, but he can't stay healthy, and that's going to be ultimately, if we look back at the career of Byron Buxton, and whenever that Hall of Fame eligibility comes up, he won't be close because he hasn't stayed healthy over the course of the career. And it's one of the big questions of the what if Byron Buxton had stayed healthy over his career, but he still puts the Twins in a good spot for a postseason chase right now.
Absolutely. So hit the like button, subscribe button. Gates are open here at Target Field, so I got to get back to my seat as people start to file in here. Hit the like button, subscribe button. This is SKOR North Extra Innings. Appreciate everyone listening and watching. That's Alex Westhead. I'm Declan Goff. Be talking at you guys soon.